Hi, Coach Ryan family here from the Fat Loss Solution. Today I've got an episode of Ask Coach Ryan Q&A where I answer your questions about training, nutrition, supplementation, life, whatever you want. Today is a big question, and it is, Coach Ryan, what are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? This is huge in the fitness industry right now, and it's ruffled a lot of feathers, to be honest. With, again, the very polarizing nature of the fitness industry where you either have to be on one side or you have to be on the other. With many people arguing with research on one side, anecdotal evidence on the other. I tend to fall in the middle. I like to use both, as you guys will see, and I don't think any answer is hardcore set in stone. But with that being said, today I want to talk a little bit about intermittent fasting. First, before I give you my opinion on intermittent fasting, we have to define it. Intermittent fasting is basically a period or a window where you do not eat, followed by a window where you do eat. So a common method that's used today is like a 16-hour fasting window and an 8-hour eating window. So maybe you only allow yourself to eat from noon to 8 p.m. The rest of the time you don't eat. And there's different variations, different versions of this concept, but that's the basic premise. Well, first off, we all intermittent fast by its very nature. Every time you go to bed and you sleep through the night, you're fasting to an extent. That's what breakfast is, breaking the fast. And so, first off, we all do it, okay? Unless you've got an IV hooked up or you wake up and you're eating constantly through the night in your dreams, which I've probably done before at some point, we all fast, okay? So let's get that out of the way first. That's a big thing that people tend to forget. There are pros to intermittent fasting, in my opinion, and there's cons to intermittent fasting when you do it from a purposeful standpoint, if you're purposefully trying to only eat during certain periods of the day. First off, the biggest pro of intermittent fasting is by way of very low levels of insulin in the morning, paired with high cortisol. Insulin is a storage hormone. It's an anabolic hormone, and if insulin's high, you're going to have a hard time burning body fat. Cortisol can be both your friend and your enemy, but in the morning, you want cortisol to be high. High cortisol helps with lipolysis, okay? Fatty acid lipolysis, which is basically the breakdown of fatty tissue to take to the bloodstream to allow it to be burned, okay? So there's fat breakdown and there's fat burning. Cortisol, high levels in the morning, affect the fat breakdown. So this is big stuff. You know, you really, if done properly, it can work to your advantage, okay? Another thing is that a lack of a large breakfast creates a growth hormone spike about 2 hours after you wake up. Growth hormone, also known as somatropin, the name is a little misleading. Yes, it causes you to grow, but that's mostly earlier on in your life when you're a child and you're actually growing. As an adult, growth hormone serves to regenerate tissue, and it also works to make you leaner. So if you can optimize your growth hormone, you'll actually burn body fat. So the research is very clear that, you know, not eating for a 2-hour period after you wake up will create a surge in growth hormone. The other thing is that research shows that people who practice intermittent fasting intentionally tend to eat fewer calories during the day. Now, calories are not the only reason why people get fat. It's not the only side of the equation is eating too much calories, but calorie control is important for some, and so this could be a big time benefit if you have trouble controlling your calories. Now for the cons. Okay, first off, catabolism with intermittent fasting can remain very high. So catabolism is basically the breakdown of muscle tissue. Its opposite is anabolism, or being anabolic. So you have anabolic on one hand, catabolic on the other. Going too long without food can make you catabolic. Now, you never, ever, ever want to break down muscle tissue, even on a fat loss diet. Okay, you want to retain as much muscle tissue as possible because muscle is greedy tissue. Muscle likes to burn calories. In fact, if you have large amounts of muscle, you're going to be able to eat a lot of food during the day and still work to be lean. So even on a fat loss diet, you should always work to maximize your muscle mass. If you start losing muscle mass, yes, the scale will go down, which I'm sure will have a lot of people celebrating, but it's not really something to celebrate because too much muscle loss will actually slow your metabolism and it'll make you fatter in the long term. Okay, so don't look just at the scale all the time when evaluating your fat loss. The next con is what I like to call the Cookie Monster effect. This describes me personally. The Cookie Monster effect is the reason why I don't succeed on an intermittent fasting protocol. And the Cookie Monster effect basically is where if you go more than a couple hours without food, your brain, like you go from being a sane, normal person that eats healthy to just this psychologically twisted person that can only think about cookies, pizza, ice cream. For me personally, if I go more than 2 or 3 hours without eating something, I find myself looking around, cookie, rah, 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 just eating everything in sight, and it's not good for me. So for me, it doesn't work that way, and there's a lot of people that are like that, and a lot of that has to do with blood sugar stability levels. If you go too long without food, your blood sugar can hit a nice valley, and when your blood sugar gets really low, your body says it's an emergency because the brain needs glucose, and so you tend to reach for things that are faster acting carbs, so more sugary things that are bad for you. So if the Cookie Monster effect describes what happens to you if you go too long without food, you may not want to go with intermittent fasting as it's often prescribed. Okay. Another big negative that people don't really talk about is that people with large amounts of muscle mass may not get enough nutrients in with an intermittent fasting model. Okay, and a perfect example, several years ago, probably been 6 years now, at Miami University, we once had a football player that came in as a true freshman, was 330 pounds and lean. Like you could see his abs. I mean, he was an impressive physical specimen. He's in the NFL right now as we speak. And if he would come to me right now with the physique that he has and say, hey, can you get me leaner? Can you get me cover model lean? 4% body fat, shredded. I would not put him on an intermittent fasting program because with that amount of muscle mass, restricting his intake to only 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day, there's no way he could get in enough calories to sustain that high level of muscle mass. If you remember, muscle mass is hugely important for your metabolism. So for him, I would not even go near an intermittent fasting protocol. Okay, same thing with any kind of bodybuilder where there's a lot of muscle mass. Now, if it's someone that's smaller, so if someone's only maybe 200 pounds and they got some fat to lose and they don't have the Cookie Monster issue and, intermittent fasting, maybe they've got a busy schedule, I may put them on an intermittent fasting protocol. Okay, so again, another con, people with large amounts of muscle mass may not do well with intermittent fasting. Finally, the last one is with females. Fasting tends to affect females differently than it does males. It's no secret females have a much more complex hormonal system than males do. This is not taking shots at anybody or saying that women are difficult. It's physiologically the way it is. There's a lot of different turning wheels with female metabolism, and for some reason females in my experience tend to get more of the negative effects more rapidly with fasting than males do. So I am not hugely on board with fasting type protocols for females most of the time. Okay, again, there's always two sides to the coin. There's always exceptions to the rule. I don't want to live by dogma and say you should never do it, but just be cautious. If you're female and you're thinking about trying the fasting, give it a shot, and if you start to see some negative effects from it, then maybe it's time to switch to a different protocol. Now, here's the final kind of say on it. For me, I always like to believe that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, so if you get great results with intermittent fasting, let's say you try it and you get increased levels of energy, your body fat goes down, you're able to maintain your muscle mass, and it helps you have more freedom in your day, then I am all for it. Okay, I also think that it's something that can be cycled. Okay, you don't do the same training protocol week in, week out, year in, year out. You cycle it, you change it so that the body is always constantly guessing, so it can never fully adapt. You can do the same thing with dieting and eating for fat loss, and I frequently do this. I will put 4-week blocks or 6-week blocks of intermittent fasting style of eating in my clients' programs, and a lot of times it'll help them get through a plateau. It'll improve just everything metabolically, and then when we go back to a more frequent eating schedule, their results continue to take off. We never allow them to reach a plateau. And so I don't see any reason why, even if you're a female, why you couldn't do a short block of intermittent fasting here or there. Again, cycle your eating the same way that you do your training. You'd be crazy to do the same thing all the time and expect different results. Myself, I tend to do sometimes no more than 6 weeks at a time of an intermittent fasting block for people before I get them on a more regular schedule. Okay, so that's it for me for today, Coach Ryan. My thoughts on intermittent fasting. See you next time. God bless.